This is TWiT.
European regulators have summoned Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo to talk about how these companies have implemented the EU's right to be forgotten ruling. Regulators will insist that search engines censor search results not only in Europe, but globally, according to some media reports. They also may pressure Google to stop notifying websites that have been affected by the censorship, according to these reports. Aoife White is a Brussels-based reporter for Bloomberg and joins us now to talk about this issue. Welcome, Aoife.
Hello.
So glad you're here. Now, you wrote that one data protection commissioner said the right to be forgotten ruling had backfired. What did he mean by that?
That this is a work in progress. It's a work in progress for regulators, very much so for Google. And they have, a court ruled 2 months ago now, in case you've forgotten, about giving not very clear advice on what, and ordering Google to be in the first row of what they should do here, and that they should take requests directly from people who want to be forgotten. And Google had to come up with its own set of rules, which it did, and it's starting to make those requests and disappear people from certain links, and a search only on a person's name, not very widely. And people who aren't happy with how Google is dealing with this can go to their local data protection regulator, and there's 28 of them. There's one in every EU member state. And some of them have different ideas about what should be private and what shouldn't be. And they need to get together and figure out what the rules should be for the whole of Europe. And they invited in Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft to talk about this and to hear from them today. But they still haven't come up with any decision of what those guidelines should be and how they should jointly deal with problems that they see with Google. So we're going to see that process rumble on. Certainly they'll meet again later this year in September, and they'll try and bash out those guidelines. But in the meantime, Google is making those requests and dealing with the requests that it gets from people, and it's had an awful lot. Other search engines are rolling out their solutions. Microsoft already has, Yahoo hasn't yet. And we're still waiting to know whether there is any room for maneuver. What's the wiggle room here?
Now, of course, we hear a lot of chatter in the United States about this as a hugely controversial thing, and it's an interesting issue because, in general, the public that's paying attention to this, at least, tends to be generally opposed to the EU's ruling around the right to be forgotten. And as I understand it, within Europe, the people who are paying attention are generally in favor of it. So that's an interesting cross-Atlantic dynamic there. But is there chatter in the European Union among either the people involved in this or among the public or the press that that they risk creating a precedent that would invite other governments like in China or Iran to sort of censor or change search engines globally? For example, I'm sure that the government of Pakistan would like to erase all kinds of things or get rid of all kinds of queries that are possible with Google search globally, right? Is there any concern within Europe that could happen?
You do hear that rhetoric. I've seen it mostly in the UK press, where there's perhaps more interest in media freedom. I don't think I see this described as censorship, and that's a little unfair. There are strong rights to privacy.
Can I stop you there? I searched a dozen dictionaries today, and I couldn't find a single entry that would make this not be censorship. The definition of the word censorship is what they're doing here. They're removing information for the public good, ostensibly, and it's censorship. I don't understand. I've heard people say that it's not censorship, but as far as I can tell, that's what the word means.
Well, we live under the law, and the law says that certain things should not be published. Whether it's a juvenile conviction, for example, Holocaust denial in Germany is something that you can't publish. You can't publish the names of people involved in a court case in Germany. So there are lots of rules throughout Europe about what you can publish and what you can't in certain circumstances. And as a journalist, I work in Belgium, so that we have to obey some of the rules in Belgium. But those are where this becomes more complicated is that each of those regulators has an opinion. And you were asking about what I wrote about. That was the opinions of some of the regulators, and they need to come together with what they think should be the case for across Europe. And there are probably some who feel that Google it should publish more, shouldn't have to take down as many links as they do. And there are some people who feel they should do more. And there was the two issues that were raised were notifications, where Google tells a website that it's going to remove a link, and where it applies the ruling to local Google sites, so google.co.uk, the UK site, for example. And it doesn't do it on google.com, even though I can search right away. I could search on any name I like, and I would get the information. I mean, so I still have that access to that information, right or wrong.
Now, is there any conversation in Europe about why only U.S.-based search engines are being forced to comply with this ruling? There are lots of smaller search engines in Europe and other search engines around the world. Why are they singling out only America-based search engines?
Well, the ruling says any search engine. Google is by far the most used search engine in Europe, and we see that. We have an antitrust case going on about that issue, which is another thing entirely. But Bing, Opera, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo have very, very small market shares in Europe, and not very big elsewhere either. So that and Google took this case. Google challenged the decision by a privacy regulator, and that went to an EU court. So I suppose this has become the Google ruling and directed at Google because they did fight the case, and they provide most of the searches in Europe. But no, I mean, the law is fairly clear. It applies to all search engines.
Christina Warren, I would like you to weigh in on this. I mean, here we have a situation where, you know, let's face it, Google is being kind of passive-aggressive about their compliance with this ruling. They're putting this notification at the bottom of all search results that involve a name that these results could be modified. It sounds like they're going the extra mile to sort of let everybody know that this is happening, this ruling exists. They're notifying various publications like the BBC and the Guardian newspaper, which then made changes in response. What do you think they're likely to do if these reports are correct? I mean, you've been following the technology scene in the U.S. What is Google, for example, going to do if European regulators say, look, you can't tell anybody about this, and you have to change these results globally? Do you think they're going to, is there any scenario under which you can imagine them complying with this?
No, to be completely honest. And I don't think that there should be. I mean, while it's true that there might be certain publishing restrictions and things that you can and can't, publish in Europe and in various countries, Google.com, they have various search engines for other countries. Google is an index. They're not actually publishing the content, and I'm not aware of any case law that holds Google itself liable for the content of those publishers. So to me, I don't see that there would be any reason that they would want to go out of their way to either diminish letting people know what's happening, because that's, as you said, they're being very passive aggressive about it. They want people to know, hey, you're not seeing something you should be seeing, or to increase the amount of scrubbing that they're doing to affect all search engines, or all localized search engines. I don't see that happening. I think that. And Google in China, for instance, operates very differently than Google does here. But I can't see any EU ruling taking effect for primary Google.com, especially for U.S.-based servers. I think that just opens up a huge regulatory can of worms that, frankly, I think that the EU, if they really wanted to try to fight that, they're probably not going to win.
Now, Aoife White. Now, this is obviously a really interesting situation in and of itself, but it also appears to be a trend. There was a judge in Canada that required Google, only Google, no other search engine, to remove information about a specific company, not only presently, but all future websites that emerge with references to this company. And they required Google to do this globally. So it seems to be something of a trend where democratic governments are sort of having this precedent where a government in a single country can censor or make changes to a search engine globally, and it sounds to me like a pretty toxic precedent. That's my opinion. That is not your opinion. That's my opinion. Now, separately, yesterday we have another show here called This Week in Google, and on that show, a professor of journalism who's a regular on the show, he's a host of the show, named Jeff Jarvis, talked about the uneven enforcement of the ruling between search engines. For example, it's up to Google and Yahoo and Microsoft to make the decision internally about whether a claim or a request is valid or not, and then to proceed accordingly. Are European regulators concerned about the inevitable differences between search engines in the enforcement of this requirement?
I haven't heard that specifically, but yeah, I mean, they have, this is a problem. I mean, Google might have one set of rules, Yahoo might have another, and regulators can't do anything until people complain back to the regulator. And then if they're not happy with the regulator, they can go to a court. So, the process is very messy. I mean, the EU court ruling that came out in May couldn't be appealed. So Google just had to figure it out and do it so very quickly, or they chose to do so very quickly anyway. And regulators are moving very, very slowly to figure out what they should do. I mean, it's, I agree with you. This is not an ideal situation. It's not an even situation. It's a situation where a court moved much faster than legislators and companies, and everybody just had to figure out what to do. It's messy, to say the least.